Are Glory Kickboxers starting to take over MMA and the UFC? Over the weekend, Cedric Doumbe recorded a massive KO win in his PFL debut. In front of Mbappe, he had a viral moment, a 9-second KO over wrestler Jordan Zebo, and that got me thinking, is Glory Kickboxing a really good base for MMA? So in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the more successful Glory Kickboxers that have transitioned over to MMA, have made it into the UFC, and also some Glory Kickboxers that are on the come up right now, and also as well some Glory Kickboxers with some fantastic kickboxing experience but just haven't been able to break through in MMA. And one of those fighters is Jason Wilness, but I will talk about him later on in the video. I feel like the figurehead for this conversation probably is Alex Pereira. Now, I do know that Israel Adesanya definitely could be in that conversation as well, but he came over to MMA much earlier on in his career. Overall, for Alex Pereira, he come through to MMA after his Glory Kickboxing career was over. He come through, he had a 2 weight class division world championship. That doesn't make any sense at all. He won a belt in 2 weight classes, is what I'm trying to say. Was the first person to do it. And he's got some really good kickboxing wins as well, and he had a pretty good experience over 40 pro kickboxing fights, a trilogy against Yusri Belgari, a trilogy against Cesar Almeida, a win over Justin Jacoby, a win over Artem Vakatov, and also wins over Israel Adesanya in kickboxing as well. But he had a very long, storied career in kickboxing where he was able to rack up some very good wins, but he didn't make his UFC debut until 2021 when he was 34 years old. This is when a lot of fighters, especially in MMA, would be on the decline. A lot of times that we would consider UFC fighters, MMA fighters to be in their prime around the age of about 29 to 32 is kind of that agreed sweet spot in the prime. Alex Pereira come over to MMA, he come over to the UFC after his prime, or after the prime that a lot of people would consider, and he was able to win a bout. He was able to go out there, he defeated Israel Adesanya, he won the middleweight title, and now he's going on to compete for the light heavyweight championship against Yuri Prochazka later on this year. I do feel like Alex Pereira probably is the figurehead for this conversation, as I said, because he had his Glory Kickboxing career and then come over to the UFC after it instead of doing Glory Kickboxing, and while he was in the middle of it, then he come through. Now, you could say the same thing happened to Israel Adesanya. He just transitioned over to MMA and then subsequently the UFC when he was much younger. He had a very long career in kickboxing. Not a lot of fights in Glory Kickboxing, but he did find a lot of success in his career in boxing and kickboxing. Adesanya obviously is one of the greatest middleweights to ever do it, one of the greatest fighters to ever do it, although a lot of people aren't the biggest fans of him. Personally, I'm not, just due to his personality, but you cannot deny how great Israel Adesanya is as a fighter and how great he was as a kickboxer as well. He did lose to Jason Wilness and Alex Pereira in kickboxing, but he does hold a win over Yusri Belgari, and that's the second time I've talked about him because he is in this video. As Adesanya is also a guy that you could absolutely put in the conversation for this. Cedric Doumbe, I talked about him in my intro. Very good Glory Kickboxer, very good MMA fighter. He was in talks to be with the UFC, but the UFC didn't really go too seriously in the offers. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily know this, but when Doumbe was in negotiations to sign with a massive promotion, he made a complete mockery of it all, and that is why the UFC withdrew and didn't send him a serious offer. But Doumbe, he's going to be great for the PFL if he can keep his fights on the feet. And now we've got Giga Chikadze, very highly ranked fighter at 145 pounds in the UFC, 35 years old. He's getting up there in age, but once again, he had a career in Glory, he had a career in kickboxing, and he beat some pretty good guys while doing it as well. And he did have a fight against Anvar Boynazarov, which he lost, and I will be talking about Anvar Boynazarov in this video as well, and also Dylan Salvador. As you can see, Giga Chikadze, good record, 15-3, very highly ranked fighter in the UFC. Dustin Jacoby, a guy that actually kind of come out of MMA a little bit to pursue his career in boxing and kickboxing, and a lot of those fights were in Glory Kickboxing. As you can see, he had a run in MMA, he had a run in Bellator, and then he took some time off. He had some time off over in Glory. Carl Roberson could be in this conversation as well. I didn't even think of him. And then he come back and he re-signed with the UFC. and he's had a lot of success since. Highly ranked top 15 fighter at light heavyweight is Dustin Jacoby. The next one, you may not have heard of him, but you will hear of him soon. Cesar Almeida, a guy that, again, could potentially have a career like Alex Pereira. Because if you do look at Cesar Almeida, he's 35 years old. He's 4-0. He's very early on into his MMA career. But once again, a very storied GLORY Kickboxing career. A lot of good fighters that he has kickboxed against. A win over Alex Pereira in 2013. A trilogy, I guess you could say, in fact, as well. A loss to Donovan Weiss ×2. But then he went out there and he defeated Lucas Fernando, who is a very, very good fighter on the Contender Series. He is due to make his UFC debut ×2, apparently, against Christian Leroy Duncan. That's going to be a fun fight. Cesar Almeida getting up there in age 35. If he's going to make something happen, he has to do it soon. Another fighter that's about to make his UFC debut is Jonata Diniz. Now, he is also a former GLORY Kickboxer in the heavyweight division. He is 6-0. He won over Eduardo Neves, knocked him out brutally in the first round on Dana White's Contender Series. He also had career in kickboxing over in GLORY, fought some pretty good guys, and has done it for a very long time. Will be interesting to see how far he can take his career, as well as Junior Tuffer. Now, Junior Tuffer is the younger brother of Justin Tuffer, and Junior Tuffer is also a former GLORY Kickboxer who had a lot of success. Now, you may not know this about Junior Tuffer, but at one point in his kickboxing career in GLORY, he was a top 10 heavyweight of the world. He was a very good kickboxer when he was fighting for GLORY. Now, if you do watch his fights, they are a lot of fun. I mean, he just goes out there, he brawls, he has a good time, honestly. His fights are fantastic to watch. But he doesn't throw a lot of kicks in those matchups, but it doesn't matter. Still a former top 10 GLORY Kickboxer that has come over to MMA, has come over to the UFC, has already recorded his first UFC win over Parker Porter, and he should be pretty good. I mean, he's 26 years old as a heavyweight. Very good base. Yusri Belgari, I mean, a trilogy with Alex Pereira, I believe a win over Israel Adesanya in kickboxing as well. He lost to Israel Adesanya twice, I should say, sorry. But he did beat Jason Wilness. He did beat Alex Pereira. And, yeah, he did actually recently lose on Dana White's Contender Series to Marco Tulio in a fight which he looked pretty terrible in, to be honest. But it came out that it turns out he was sick when he was doing the fight. So I guess in hindsight, he probably should have pulled out. But he is now a training partner of Alex Pereira. He's a very good kickboxer. He's 6'5" at 185. 31 years old still. I think you could see Belgari in the UFC. He probably will have to go on a little bit of a win streak now. Dylan Salvador is a guy that you probably will see again. He did fight on the Contender Series. He did lose to Balaji Oki. Oki was just super aggressive, overwhelmed him, and looked pretty good in that matchup. But it's also a former GLORY Kickboxer with a win over Giga Chikadze in GLORY of Heroes. Not to be confused with GLORY Kickboxing, but he does have fights in GLORY. He does have good wins in GLORY. And 4 submission wins as an MMA fighter. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you do watch him, he is a very good kickboxer. It's a shame he lost on the Contender Series. Another fighter that lost on the Contender Series, former GLORY Kickboxer, is Anvar Boynazarov, who is 4-2. Hasn't found the most success as a pro MMA fighter. He got dominated by Eric Silva on the Contender Series. And now he's gone on to lose his first fight at 135 pounds as a MMA fighter. So he's having up and down success. He's still trying to make it, but he's pretty old. He's 34 years old. Another fighter didn't even have to go through the Contender Series when he probably should have in hindsight. Blood Diamond, 3-3, but he does have fights in GLORY Kickboxing. He's got at least one of them. Unfortunately, has not found success in the UFC, but he still made it to the UFC, which is pretty good. Jason Wilness, honestly, probably one of the better kickboxers on this list. I mean, maybe I'm overrating him a little bit, but we're talking about a guy that did beat Israel Adesanya, that did beat Alex Pereira twice, I should say, and has good wins, man. I mean, he lost to Donovan Weiss, who's very good himself. I believe Donovan Weiss has actually got an MMA fight. He does not. I'm an idiot. But one fighter that does is Artem Vakatov, but I'll talk about that later. He has gone on to have not a lot of success in kickboxing. You can tell he's trying to really get something going though, because he's taken on good guys. You know, he started off with a 1-on-1 opponent, and then he beat a guy making his debut, and then he's trying to take on some pretty solid fighters, a 3-0 fighter, a 7-2 fighter, and then a 4-2 fighter. So you can tell that although he's losing, he's still taking on some good guys. I mean, I hope that we can see Jason Wilness in the UFC one day. Very, very talented kickboxer. I do just kind of wish that we can see him get a little bit more wrestling and grappling and then get something going. But unfortunately, we haven't quite seen that yet. And then the last one that I want to talk about is Artem Vakitov. I mean, Artem MMA, Artem Vakitov, we go hand in hand. It is a big shame that he lost his MMA debut. And it was by injury as well. I actually haven't seen the fight, but he had two very, very close fights with Alex Pereira. It's a shame he lost, man, because I feel that, I'm going to be honest with you guys, if Artem Vakitov won this fight, the UFC would probably sign him, even though he's 1-0. A big shame. Hopefully we can see him back again. It's a big shame that what happened to him. I haven't seen the fight, but I thought I'd mention him, and I think he's someone to look out for. If I forgot someone, let me know in the comments below. Little hint, Cyril Gane never fought for Glory, even though I thought that he did. But yeah. Let me know what you think in the comments, and let me know if I forgot someone. I'll see you guys in the next one.